Well, hello there, community. Welcome to this special episode of DevCentral Connects that we title You Want Answers. And typically we start with some certification questions, then move into some DevCentral Q&A. But this week we're actually going to put certification aside, and we're just going to talk about the edge. And, we titled this Gettin Edgy with It, as, old school Will Smith getting jiggy with it. And Peter did a phenomenal job leading us in with the promotional stuff. So we're going to just talk about the edge very briefly, very plainly. What is the edge? And I had a chance yesterday to sit down with Lori for a few minutes to talk about that. Lori McVitie, distinguished scholar and an engineer and evangelist here at F5. And so I'll have a couple clips to play from her, and then we'll talk about each of those clips a little bit, and then we'll get into some DevCentral Q&A. Before we do that, I wanted to start with an intro question. Last time I talked about, just kind of my love of things space related, and my little man, who's 3, is really into space as well. And so, the question for you is, how many burns once a spaceship is in a parking orbit does it take to go from that parking orbit to docking with the ISS? While you think about that for a second, I'll talk about what we have coming up. We have DevCentral Connects. John will be back with me next Thursday. And then we're doing a back-to-back because we got some vacations going on in July, and also resources on when they were available. So July 8th, we'll have a special show on the MITRE attack framework. If you recall, when we had Sander on to talk about the app report, app protect report, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. Anyway, it was during RSA week. We're having a guest on who's going to come talk about that attack framework, and he is Jamie Williams. And so he'll be on with us to talk about the MITRE attack framework, which will be awesome. John then has security sidebar on the 15th. Then July 22nd, if you remember Mr. Capobianco and Dan Pacheco from the Parliament in Canada, they're going to come back with us, talk about more automation stories and excitement. And so that's just about 4 weeks from today. And then we'll close out July with another episode of You Want Answers. So, did you figure it out? How many burns? Anybody have a guess? It is a total of 7, if you don't count the reversing orientation, because they have some little micro burns. It's not really changing their orbital speed. It's just reversing the spaceship so that it can come back into dock. But the home and transfer, there's 2 of those, and then there's some correction burns in the middle of those 2 to get into phase with the ISS, and then 1 burn to slow it down, because actually it inserts an orbit in front of the ISS, and then it has to slow itself down, so the ISS essentially comes and catches up. So if you were one who thought the shuttle or the Soyuz takes off, or even the Crew Dragon on the Falcon 9 takes off and then just goes straight to the ISS, that is incorrect. It first goes into a parking orbit, and then it works its way up to the ISS. So the more you know. All right. So we are going to talk about we're gonna get in to the first clip with Lori McVitie, and my question was, very high level, what the heck is Edge? So let's get into that, and then we'll come back for a little bit of commentary. I'm here with Lori McVitie, fittingly on International Women in Engineering Day, since she's probably one of the smartest and most capable persons I know, woman or otherwise, at bringing humor, insights, simplicity, and comprehension to what my good friend Jeff Browning called BHQs, big hairy questions. So Lori, real talk, what the heck is edge computing really?
Yeah, it's somebody else's computer. I think that's the answer you were looking for, right? I mean, ultimately. No, I came up with one this morning that kind of ties it all up. Edge is where your app is.
Okay.
ultimately, that's what we want. We want to be able to say that the edge is where your app lives. It's close. It's on your phone. It's on a server in my closet, or maybe it's in a server at the local retail mall or a cell tower. But it's a little tiny data center, maybe just one server, maybe 5, but very small, where resources, compute, network, all the traditional things are made available to people so that they can actually put their apps there and get data processed faster, better response times, just get closer to the user.
Okay, so
edge is where your app is.
So the concept is like a micro pop in the old, networking days of old, a micro pop, but for applications, right?
Yeah. We've come full circle. It's your local BBS. All right. That's that's how you get on the internet, right? FidoNet over. Okay.
There you go. Okay, yeah. And what Lori said is, everybody's like, well, and I wrote an article that came out yesterday, just kind of talking briefly about what the edge is and linking to articles written by people that are way smarter than me that go into the details of why edge and how to edge and all that stuff. But, brass tacks, what is the edge? And depending on whose definition you're looking at, it's like, well, that sounds a whole lot like cloud. And it's true in that edge services, build upon the technology that came out of cloud. With cloud, we kind of really learned how to decentralize storage and compute and all those things. And edge really is about distribution. It's about taking what we decentralized and then spreading it out. Not necessarily just to have a coverage here and a coverage there, but between request and service. So, and I have here on the slide here, it's like, where is the edge, right? Well, the edge exists in a lot of places along the path. You've got your private cloud, your public cloud, your private data center, your regional POPs and whatever. But it takes the form differently if it's a provider edge or a telco edge or even the customer edge. And one of the things that you think about, and I use this illustration in my article, is talking about a farm. And you have all these different machines on a farm, whether it's your cattle milking industrial technology, or how that milk is pasteurized or whatever, and you have that at a local farm, but that local farm could be a huge enterprise, and you're talking thousands of devices, and then maybe you have 5 or 6 of those around the country, or five or 6 of those within a region, and then 5 or 6 in an additional region. And if you're just in the cloud era, you're putting all of that technology, all of that reporting, all of that stuff, and you're pushing all the data up to either your private data center or your cloud. And now with edge, you're shifting a lot of that technology downward so that it's closer to where the action is happening. And things like combines or tractors putting seeds down, combines collecting things. And I'm not a farmer, so I couldn't begin to tell you what the use case is on any individual one. But if there's like a real-time processing need, then maybe that equipment's sitting idle, or maybe that equipment is hurting something if it's not getting the immediate processing it needs. And so from an efficiency standpoint, a safety standpoint, of course, with hospital safety standpoints, but even security, it's like maybe you don't want some of that data going all the way out to the cloud because of the amount of technology that it's going to hit along the way that might compromise some of that. Maybe it's best to keep all of that local and then send up what's necessary instead of everything. Reduces that threat landscape. But you can see that that happens at the customer edge, the telco edge, the provider edge. And so the next thing I had with Lori is, okay, we kind of have covered kind of what the edge is, why the edge, and why now.
Find space, and there's not a lot of good cooling And it's really warm out in case, you wanted to know why it's like hot in the market. I see. You gotta be really specific with me or I'll take you the wrong way. It's really hot because, right, as our response to COVID was everybody go home, right? That's one. So everybody dispersed. And then you also had people going, I need to do things. And the answer was, well, you can only do that virtually, which really means digitally. So you had people, right, trying to access all sorts of things over the internet, and it wasn't fast enough. Sites fell over. It disrupted business and schools because those sites fell over. So the response is, for years, we've been solving this problem called the speed of light by kind of making that distance smaller. We did it with content. Then we did it with some services. We said, apps have to get at the edge too, because that's really the last thing we can move to make things faster. And that's what we have to do, because a lot of us are not going to go back to the office. A lot of us are going to remain distributed. And gee, darn it, digital as default is kind of nice. Right? When's the last time you pulled out a phone book? You don't.
Never. Right.
Exactly. The default, right? My kid doesn't even know what a phone book is for,
Yeah, I think up until last year, I still had them delivered on my door. But I think we're finally at the point where the phone company is like, okay, nobody's going to look at these again.
No, which is kind of weird because, right, I mean, that means you can't just look up like the person across, maybe we didn't. I guess maybe it stops with prank calling, right? What did you use the phone book for except who looked up their friends? So we get our numbers, right? Or we find it on an internet search, right? What is your business? And half the time you don't want to call them anyway. Nobody uses phones to call. How quaint, right? We just text and interact with bots or go on the web. So it's all digital, and it's going to stay that way. And that puts an incredible strain on those services, whether they're in a cloud or not, because most clouds, the closest one to me is where? Ohio. I can tell you that because of gaming, right? That's where the North America East region is in like Ohio or North Carolina. That's still a ways away. That means everybody in big regions are all trying to converge on a cloud data center or a traditional data center. Eventually that's just going to fall over if we have 8 billion people trying to play the same game. It's not going to work.
For sure.
Need the edge.
That's right. So yeah, it's like it used to be 100 milliseconds wasn't good enough, so I need 6 milliseconds. Now 6 milliseconds isn't good enough. It's like I need now. Like, I want to trade my stock and I don't want it to take 100 milliseconds. I want to get in like now. And yeah.
Right. You remember the story of the trading company that actually like laid fiber. It cost like, what was it? $100 million for 100 feet or something. I mean, it was like this incredible cost just to get, right. Performance is a huge thing. So, right. Edge is going to allow us to move those apps closer to us so that, because we can't fix speed of light. We haven't figured that one out. I mean, I know there's been some playing with teleportation, but I think that's still a few years off. Maybe after we get hoverboards. Still waiting for that, by the way.
That's right. Thank you, Back to the Future. You set my expectations.
Yeah, way too high, apparently.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So, why is it hot? The reality is performance is constantly a strain, but also, with everybody going home during the COVID era and everybody realizing, hey, we really can do this. The big transition back to the office, I think, isn't going to be as big as everybody thinks. And so this is here to stay. And what everybody has tolerated for the last year and a half, because it's what we had, won't necessarily be something that pushes forward. I think that toleration is going to expire, and people are going to demand better. And so that means absolutely a shift from the data center closer to where the users are. And incidentally, the user isn't necessarily a person. The user can be a machine. And so, you got to think about that in the context of, your tractors and your toasters and, your lawnmower outside, your cell phone, whatever. We got a question from Alex. I'm wondering if the Noble Home Router will become part of the Edge. Absolutely. I think you're going to see more and more services built on top of what's effectively commodity technology now. That you're going to see that change quite a bit. And okay, so next, we talked about where or what the Edge is, why it's hot right now. And I want to dive into this slide, but before we do, I want to have the last little chat with Lori about kind of where Edge is today and where it's going. So, what are 3 things everybody in the industry should know about the Edge of today and the Edge of tomorrow? You can't say Emily Blunt or Tom Cruise.
I was going to say, weren't those movies or something like that?
The Edge of tomorrow was.
The Edge of today is emerging. So, right now, it's mostly comprised of, little data centers, people, putting it together, a lot of startups. There's a lot of different approaches. Some Edge startups are focused on, we're building peer-to-peer communications for applications. That's how we're going to do things. Other ones are focused, like we are, focusing on how can we move those apps and do it in a way that's very simple. How can we, basically make it easy to do, multi-cloud, which includes the Edge. Other ones are focused on IoT solutions, specifically for manufacturing, healthcare, really low latency demanding applications. So there's a lot of different uses right now. You're not going to miss Edge if you're not in it right now. Okay. So you have a little time, and really it's the Edge of tomorrow is going to start really getting better defined probably in the next 12 to 18 months. And then we'll see, more of those tools that you need and more of the resources you need to be able to actually take advantage of it. Right now is the time to be looking at it and saying, could this be an Edge thing? Or, how would I do that? Or, just basically getting familiar with it, understanding where it fits and how it might match your business needs, because not every business will need it, and just kind of, digging in and learning more.
Yeah. So, what I don't think I've had it in that clip, but I trimmed it for time. I mean, she talked about it being still an emerging technology, Edge. And that's encouraging because for everybody that's not quite there yet, you have time. You have time to get into Edge technologies. And she did say, if you're not already on the boat with cloud, then you're going to be really behind with Edge. So if you're still thinking cloud might be something we'll do, now's the time to get your feet wet on that and also move into Edge technologies. But with this slide in particular, talking about where the Edge goes, and I have an article that I'll put in the show notes that links to a bunch of stuff that talks about our concept of what the Edge of yesterday was versus what the Edge of today is, and they break it down into Edge 1.0 being pretty much just a content delivery network and delivering static content, bringing it, closer to where everybody is. And then 1.5 added some dynamic services and whatnot, but they're fairly closed, and it has to be on that particular provider's architecture or infrastructure and whatnot. And so what Edge 2.0 brings is this concept of an open edge, and it takes kind of the manual stitching. If you think about for my NetOps friends out there, using something like Ansible playbooks to be able to abstract away the nuances of trying to do BGP in Vios or Junos or Cisco. And, it's like if you need to bring in somebody with the expertise of all 3 of those routing vendors and learn their individual syntaxes, or you could take a declaration of this is what I want my BGP peer to say, and then you execute a playbook and it goes. You have taken away the manual stitching required to understand all of that stuff. And then for, the developer persona, you look at something like Let's Encrypt and you want to use a DNS challenge, but you have some domains that use rack space, and you have some domains that use AWS or name.com or on and on. Excuse me. And so, if you have a library that you can incorporate into your hook scripts that understands the nuances of all the APIs to build out those DNS challenges for them, then you've abstracted all of that away. And the key here for the open edge is abstraction. And really the key has been abstraction all along. You had the very early ages of computer programming. So you had assembler, and then, you had like a language like C that abstracted away some of the hard stuff about assembler. And then you have higher level languages now that even you don't even have to do any kind of memory management or garbage collection or all that. It's all taken care of for you. Now, you'll have pushback on that. It's like, well, okay, yeah, but now I might have some performance problems with that, and that might be true in some cases, but by and large, abstraction moves the industry forward. It's like abstract and shift, and what the Volterra stuff does with that is you have a single API that handles all of that abstraction for you. I mean, it is your abstraction layer. You don't have to figure the bare metal. You don't have to figure the AWS or the Google Cloud or the Azure. It's like you have one interface to work with, and it figures all the other stuff out for you. And so it's a big step forward with trying to deal with the manual stitching issues, with bringing services together, whether it's multi-cloud services, whether it's edge services, whether it's anything. It's a really captivating and powerful technology. And so if you haven't taken a look at the Volterra stuff, we had a show a while ago on Volterra, and I can link that as well in the show notes. Go out and check that out. They Mark, I think it was Mark joined us for that show. Did a really, really good job. Mark Weiner did a really good job of sharing the kind of the where we are and how we solve those problems. And so you'll definitely want to go out and check that out as well. So that's what I'm going to say about Edge. Of course, we could talk hours and hours on multiple days about Edge. There's entire conferences on Edge. And so, I have not gone into the deep end by any means, but I wanted to talk briefly about and plainly about what the Edge is, why it's here, and what we can do about it. All right. And so, well, that was unexpected. That was not supposed to be the end of the show. I thought I had one more slide, but that's okay. We'll just go over to Q&A. Get to the right place, right monitor. Okay. Oh, there's a comment in there. Oh yeah, Peter is doing the thing Peter does. He's just linking like crazy. So thank you, Peter. You are quite the wingman in this live streaming experience. If you want to go in the Wayback Machine to Top Gun from the mid 1980s, it's like you never leave your wingman. And he's quite the wingman. And so thank you, Peter, for being on top of that. All right. So we're just going to go into some DevCentral Q&A that I found interesting. And we'll start at the front and go to the end. Okay, packet processing order. This is a question from Ashish Solanki. I hope I said that right. And talking about, he's got a F5 VM hosted in Azure. And it has modules like LTM, DNS, Advanced WAF, AFM. Kind of need to know how that is processed in case multiple modules are enabled. And so Nico shares in here, the answer. It's like, look, it goes through this process of, AFM, because it's the lower levels, would be the first module. Packet filter is a feature within the big IP. The AFM would be like that first module that attacks that packet coming in. Any of the DDoS filters, whether they're hardware or software, would be in play there. And then the LTM module for any kind of thing like just the virtual server that's going to respond on that, any kind of profile application stuff. And then the APM, so access, it's going to do access first, and then it's going to do ASM or advanced WAF. So that is correct. And then also just kind of looking over, if I have an article from a few years ago, kind of talks about the getting started with the iRules, and it kind of talks through the events, but it also you can kind of see that flow in these the Visio diagrams. And so actually I think I misspoke here. He had a ASM and APM backwards. Let me go back up to his APM and ASM. It depends on how it's configured and whether you're on box. But yeah, ASM would at the request level respond first. But if you have AFM or APM applied, that APM is going to collect the session before a request would even be responded to anyway. So, but that is some documentation out here for you on events and priorities for flow through the system. ASM and APM are plugins, and so they're handled a little differently, and so it depends on configuration on how they flow. But AFM for sure before LTM, and that's of course on the request side. On the response side, there's a flow as well. Next one that I wanted to talk about, this one was really interesting. It's /32 IPs and data group class match are not matching, and so basically this comes down to what he found is that, let me get down here. Okay. Yeah. So basically in this format in the data group, it was working correctly, where you have a mask for everything until the host. And so a specific IP that you're trying to match, he's finding in his testing that it requires host and then the specific IP instead of allowing it to be a network with a /32. And so if that's, I'm not sure if that's an issue on that particular version that he is running, or if that's a particular version across the board. But I would think that would be supported either way. But I know the host specification is used in more objects than just the big I or just the data group, and so it's possible that was an oversight. But from my perspective, that should work. Whether it's designated as a host or a network /32, because the /32 is still, is still a network, even if it's a single designation. The next one here, difference in number of VIPs fetched by CLI and GUI. This was asked by Ganesh Prasad Gupta, and the question in itself is like, they should match. If you have a certain number on the GUI, it should match what's on the CLI. And so, that's not necessarily the interesting thing. Could be, it was buried in something, or they just were kind of out of sync on what was running config versus saved config. Doesn't really say how he was collecting that information. So that wasn't necessarily the interesting part. The interesting part was Hi Kumar, or I don't know how to say it. Is it Jai or Hi Kumar? Has a little script of output data to be able to pull from that, and it looks garbled. It looks like a mess here in the browser. But if you pull that out and put it in a text editor, and then you can run it in your big IP. Basically, it takes the TMSH LTM virtual show data, dumps it in a file, and then he has a bunch of work against that, whether he's counting words here, or he's grepping and doing various snatches of data in that to be able to pull out the valuable data from that LTM. So it's pretty much taking standardized output and cleaning it up significantly for specific looks. Another way that you could do that, where you're not looking at the the specific, I mean the unspecific, just text dump, is you can do the all properties and then the field format option in TMSH, and then it dumps it to field and value. You might lose some of the output when you do that, and so you have to know what you're looking for in order to see if you want the field format or not. But that was really cool that he shared. So I suggest that you go out and pull that down. Thanks, Peter, for sharing that link. The next one here was just an interesting nuance about the TCL language, and using curly braces in a comment or an iRule. I try not to, and it's because of stuff like this. If you ever have an if statement in an iRule and you've wanted to uncomment that out and you get errors and you're like, why is that erroring? It's because of stuff like this, because of white space. And Kathy handles that pretty good. Kathy Rodriguez shares about that. But basically it's like, hey, this errors out, but when I do this, it doesn't. And the reason is because you have a matching pair of brackets. And so even though that's on a comment line, the bracket is significant, and so it will save just fine. But in this one where there's a comment, well, now you have an unmatched bracket, and so it's going to complain about that. So that's just a nuance of Tickle, and so yeah, DPK, yeah, hi Jay Kumar, hi Kumar, I don't, Jay or hi if you are on here or come back later. Is it Jay or is it hi, so I can get it correct in the future? Because I hate it that I don't pronounce people's names right, but I don't know until I know, And so anyway, that one was interesting, and we're over. If you have to go, totally understand, but I'm going to get through the rest of these, and then we'll call it good for the day. This one was interesting because it's just highlighting the database. So if you do a TMSH show sysdb, and or a TMSH list sysdb, it'll show you all the values that are in the database. And so there's all kinds of little nuanced little settings that you can change or not change. One of the ones I will use more frequently is the big D.debug value. So if you want to troubleshoot monitor data as it's coming in to see why your monitors are failing, if you know that the service is good, you'll get debug data there. There's different things you can change about the way TCP behaves. In this one, it's changing the way that the host traffic behaves based upon SNAT. And so Simon Blakely, thank you, goes in there and says it can look at the host source traffic and then SNAT the source IP to the best source, so to make sure that based upon the TMM routing table instead of the host table, that traffic might be able to get back to you. And so, it's little stuff like that. So this is interesting, not necessarily because of this specific value, but just, for those of you who have not really done too much with the database, you can go and list all those values out and then see if there's stuff in there that you might want to know more about or tweak and tune. So for the Nerd Knobs fans out there, the sysdb is for you. This one was interesting because I don't know why you would want an iRule for round robin behavior, and so I'm gonna follow up on this one. I haven't answered him yet, but basically he wants to round robin traffic for two nodes listening on multiple ports, and so I don't know if he wants to go these three and then these three, but ultimately if you're just round robining, it's not going to matter because they're all going to get a round robin nature of traffic, whether it's at the member or node at level. And so I think maybe Sulab is overthinking this one, because round robin is round robin. There's no brain science, there's no science to that at all. It's just, oh, you're next up. And so I'll follow up on that one. And but I think sometimes with configurations and stuff, we do tend to overthink things, and so that's why I just wanted to point that one out. And then Martin answered his own question on how to replace the host using regex. So he's like, I've got this domain coming in. I want to change it to something specific. And so he answered his own question here. He used a string map. And then he said, and that's his solution without regex. And, kudos to Martin for finding a solution without regex. He wants to know the solution with regex because sometimes it's helpful in order to do that. However, a string command is always best over regex. If you can do it with a string command, always best. Specifically because iRules are working on traffic real time. It's not like you're working on a file in a database or a file in a file system or something, and that real time nature of the iRules event loop isn't looming. So the regex, I think, just to spin up the regex engine is an 8x operation to a string command, but then it also has to do that operation. And so definitely not something you want to do. It is far less performant to do regex. And then, okay, I got a couple questions here. It's like, is F5 planning to modify GUI interface for better user interface in concern of functionality? If you will shoot me a message with your, give me a little bit more feedback on that, more specific details on what you're looking for and what you're hoping to achieve. I can get that to the people who do the design. In fact, we have, I think, spun up in our office of the CTO now, somebody specifically looking at the nature of design in our tools and stuff. And so, yeah, he put that up there. j.ram@f5.com is my email. And so hit me up and I will get that into the right hands. I will say, too, there have been some people, and I think it's out in the code share, who have taken it upon themselves to alter the GUI. And so they'll use tamper monkey scripts that will make if you're adding, you're looking through your rules, they'll make a box bigger or smaller or those kinds of things. So they'll edit the GUI to meet their needs. They've even put in some additional functionality to where if they're using APM and they hit a particular site that I forget. I'll have to go look at the functionality, but they do kind of crazy things where they'll add buttons to the UI to do things like maybe get over to the iRule. So, oh yeah, that's what it was. One of them was they have an iRule list on the virtual server in their thing. They'll actually put hyperlinks over to those, so they don't have to go over to iRules and then find that iRule. It'll just be listed, and they can click on it, and it'll take it to them. So little things like that. There's quite a few tamper monkey script features for the Big IP interface. And then I have a question. Can we add more than one LDAP IP hostname for remote user authentication in LTM? Is this for, I believe you can. Hit me up with that question. I'll try and look that up. Yeah, just email me and I'll look that up. I think you can make a list of all of them. And if not directly, I think there's workarounds for that. But hit me up and I'll get you an answer to that, DBK. All right, migration to AS3. This is a good one because actually I just talked in office hours on Tuesday morning, kind of about that brownfield versus greenfield implementations for AS3. And every declaration from AS3 will go into its own tenant, its own partition. And so as long as you are creating them in ways that don't overlap, your existing ones, you should be able to have a system that is acceptable to both approaches, right? Your manual system that you're trying to get away from, and then your automated system that you're going to. So as long as you're careful about how you build your declarations, it should be fine in both ways. Yeah, so the question here was, does it only enable new interface for configuration? it is, if you do have anything that is part of that declaration, if you change the declaration, then the next time that declaration comes, yes, anything you change in the system would be overwritten, because that's a declarative model. It's going to apply everything that's in that. And now it won't necessarily apply everything every time, but it's going to just apply the changes, anything that's different. All right, last one, and then we are out of here. We have, is save sysconfig required for iControl REST changes? And so, yes, you should always do a save after you change things via iControl REST, because iControl REST is a wrapper around TMSH, right? And so when you make system changes, you're changing what's running on the system, but you're not changing what's loading on the system. And that's go back to your Cisco days of your running config and your boot config, and those are different things. And so what the big IP GUI does is it applies and saves in that step, but anything done at the CLI applies, it does not save. And so you always want to make sure, if that is a change that you want to survive a reboot, then yes, you would need to include that save. And so that is all I had today for the Edge and for DC Q&A. Again, we've got a lot of great shows coming up in July, including Mr. Capobianco on the 22nd. Got a couple. Oh, look at that. The green is green screen, so you can kind of see through it. That's kind of awesome. That is, I've got a couple of these. So you show up for that show on the 22nd. Maybe I'll give a couple of them away in a random drawing. Because if I make it a contest, I need to do a lot of legal things. And yeah. So anyway, random drawing on the 22nd. And thank you for joining today. And we'll see you next Thursday, 12:30 Pacific. John and I will be back for another fun episode of DevCentral Connects. Thank you all for joining, and you have a great day.